don't you think men really like intelligence more when it comes right down to it?
Please, are we going to go back to that? Are you kidding?
Sure. I mean, a brain, a caring...
Johnny Carson ruled late-night television for 3 decades, with a smile, a wink, and razor-sharp timing. But behind the smooth-talking host persona was a man who clashed fiercely with friends, rivals, and even guests.
What the hell's the matter with you? When you're on 26 years, you're starting to be like Reagan, huh?
The Tonight Show wasn't always laughs. It was sometimes the stage for real drama, betrayal, and confrontation. From celebrity walkouts to off-camera showdowns, these 10 intense moments reveal the fiery side of Johnny Carson that audiences rarely got to see. Johnny Carson vs. Joan Rivers, the ultimate late-night betrayal. For over 2 decades, Johnny Carson had been more than just a mentor to Joan Rivers. He was her gateway into the tight-knit world of late-night television. Rivers credited Carson with launching her career, giving her a platform when few others in the industry would. She was a regular guest host for The Tonight Show and, at one point, was considered by many to be his logical successor. But in 1986, everything changed in one swift and brutal turn, igniting one of the most infamous personal and professional rifts in entertainment history. When Fox offered Joan Rivers her own late-night talk show, The Late Show starring Joan Rivers, it wasn't just a professional opportunity, it was a groundbreaking move. She would become the first woman to host a late-night show on a major network. But Carson saw it differently. To him, it was betrayal, not necessarily because she took the job, but because she hadn't informed him first. According to Rivers, the network warned her that news of the show would leak within hours, and she made the painful choice not to call Carson before the press got wind of it. Carson, however, felt blindsided. What followed was both swift and cold. Carson never spoke to her again. He slammed the phone down on her when she tried to explain and refused every attempt at reconciliation. In a rare moment of vulnerability years later, Rivers admitted that Carson's rejection devastated her more than any public criticism. It wasn't just professional, it was heartbreak. She lost a mentor, a father figure, and one of the few people she had ever truly admired in show business. The rift extended beyond personal pain. It turned into an unofficial blacklist. Rivers was banned from The Tonight Show for 26 years, even long after Carson had retired. It wasn't until Jimmy Fallon took over in 2014 that she was finally welcomed back, posthumously healing a wound that had scarred late-night television for decades. The feud had lasting ripple effects on both their legacies. Carson's image as a gracious host took a hit for his coldness, while Rivers carried the sting of the fallout until her death. This wasn't just a feud. It was a seismic shift in the tone of late night, proving that the smiles on screen didn't always reflect the truths backstage. For all of Johnny Carson's charisma, his grudge with Joan Rivers showed that even kings of comedy can leave deep scars behind. Don Rickles and the Broken Box, live confrontation chaos. Don Rickles and Johnny Carson had a dynamic built on playful insults, jabs, and decades of friendship. But one night, Rickles took the wrong liberty, one that triggered an unforgettable live confrontation and became one of The Tonight Show's most talked-about unscripted moments. The crime? Rickles broke Johnny Carson's cherished wooden cigarette box. The punishment? Carson crashing Rickles' set mid-taping in front of a stunned audience. The year was 1976, and Rickles was taping his sitcom CPO Sharkey next door to The Tonight Show stage at NBC. One night, while guest hosting The Tonight Show, Rickles picked up Carson's cigarette box, a small, polished keepsake that sat on his desk every night, and accidentally broke the lid. The next evening, Carson returned, noticed the damage, and demanded an explanation from the crew. When they revealed Rickles had been the culprit, Carson saw the perfect opportunity for on-air revenge. Without warning, and with cameras rolling, Carson stormed out of his studio and walked straight into the CPO Sharkey taping. The audience, watching Rickles film a scene, was confused until Johnny Carson appeared, holding the broken box in hand. The look on Rickles' face, pure panic and disbelief. Carson immediately began grilling him in his signature deadpan tone. "You broke my box, didn't you, Don?" The audience exploded with laughter. What followed was live, chaotic brilliance. Rickles tried to deflect, cracking jokes and throwing himself at Carson's mercy. But Carson played it perfectly. Half furious, half amused, completely in control. Rickles stumbled, sputtered, and squirmed, realizing he wasn't just being pranked, he was being publicly called out in classic Johnny style. It wasn't a scripted moment. It wasn't rehearsed. It was Carson at his finest, using genuine irritation to create a comedy masterstroke. What made this moment so intense wasn't just the spontaneity. It was the peek behind the curtain. Viewers saw Carson unfiltered, letting his annoyance fuel a brilliantly uncomfortable scene. Rickles, usually the master of insult comedy, was caught off guard and humbled in real time. Yet, the affection beneath the anger was obvious. This wasn't a friendship-ending feud. It was Carson showing who was boss and doing it with a smile. To this day, the clip is celebrated as one of the greatest Tonight Show moments ever recorded. It blurred the line between reality and entertainment, between friend and foe, between host and heckler. The broken box, a small casualty, the confrontation, late-night history. And once again, Johnny Carson proved that no one, not even Don Rickles, was untouchable in his house. While Carson's showdown with Rickles was explosive yet wrapped in humor, not all confrontations ended in laughter. In fact, one of the most serious and genuinely threatening clashes happened far from the cameras, behind a closed office door. It involved a Vegas icon, personal insults, and the real possibility of violence. Wayne Newton's explosive office showdown. Johnny Carson's monologues were legendary, sharp, clever, and often devastating. For most celebrities, being mentioned was a sign you'd made it. But for Wayne Newton, Carson's jokes cut deep. They weren't playful jabs. They questioned his masculinity, hinted at mob connections, and ridiculed his stage persona. At first, Newton kept quiet, but eventually he'd had enough, and the confrontation that followed would be one of the most intense in Carson's career. Wayne Newton had built a reputation as Mr. Las Vegas, a glamorous, larger-than-life performer with a powerful voice and a carefully crafted image. But Carson frequently turned him into the punchline. He mocked Newton's appearance, suggested he was effeminate, and once joked that he wore more makeup than the Rockettes. The tipping point came when Carson joked about Newton losing a major Las Vegas casino deal, insinuating it was due to underworld interference. This wasn't just comedy anymore. It was character assassination, and Newton knew it. Unlike other celebrities who brushed off Carson's barbs, Newton took action. He stormed into NBC studios and demanded a meeting with Carson. According to multiple accounts, the conversation wasn't a conversation at all. It was a showdown. Newton, visibly furious, told Carson that if the jokes didn't stop, there would be consequences. It wasn't said with a laugh or a wink. It was deadly serious. Carson, unaccustomed to being challenged like this, especially off-camera, was stunned. Newton allegedly told him to keep my name out of your mouth, and rumors swirled that the confrontation nearly became physical. The Vegas star left no room for misunderstanding. The next joke might not be answered with words. The outcome? Carson backed off. Almost immediately, Newton's name vanished from the monologue lineup. The jokes stopped, not gradually, but overnight. For a host who prided himself on comedic freedom, Carson's retreat was telling. It spoke to the force of Newton's reputation, the seriousness of the threat, and perhaps, for once, Carson recognizing he'd pushed too far. Unlike Rickles or Rivers, Newton never played the media game about the incident. He didn't capitalize on the drama. He simply drew a line, and Carson never crossed it again. The encounter remains one of the few times Johnny Carson was publicly and directly confronted about his humor. It wasn't funny. It wasn't entertaining. It was raw, real, and unforgettable. Wayne Newton's confrontation showed that Carson's words, when too sharp, could provoke serious consequences. But sometimes, it wasn't threats or shouting matches that ended relationships. It was the quiet, enduring decision to walk away. That's exactly what actor Raymond Burr did, after years of being the butt of Carson's relentless jokes. Raymond Burr pushes back. Fat jokes turn bitter. Raymond Burr was a celebrated actor best known for his commanding roles in Perry Mason and Ironside. With a deep voice, intense presence, and impressive career, Burr was every bit the accomplished guest Carson typically welcomed with open arms. But over time, Burr became a recurring target in Carson's monologues, not for his acting, but for his weight. Carson, never shy about using physical appearances for comedic effect, regularly tossed Burr's name into jokes about overeating, size, and sluggishness. At first, it may have seemed harmless to the audience, just another celebrity roast from late night's king. But for Burr, the jokes weren't funny. They were humiliating, and they kept coming. According to those close to Burr, he quietly asked producers to ease up on the jokes. But the message never seemed to reach Carson, or worse, was ignored. The tension finally came to a head after Burr's second appearance on The Tonight Show in 1976. Though cordial on camera, Burr had had enough. He refused to return, turning down future invitations and distancing himself from Carson completely. Unlike more public feuds, this one played out in silence. There were no headlines, no dramatic phone calls, no show-stopping walkouts. Burr simply withdrew, leaving behind an empty chair and an unspoken message. There's a line between humor and humiliation, and Carson had crossed it. The public never got to witness an explosive confrontation, but the fallout spoke volumes. Carson never publicly addressed Burr's absence, and Burr, for his part, avoided discussing Carson in interviews. It was a cold war of sorts, no shots fired, but the damage was done. And perhaps more than any other celebrity on this list, Burr's quiet resistance challenged Carson's power in a uniquely dignified way. What makes this feud so intense, despite the lack of on-air fireworks, is how deeply it reflected Carson's blind spots. He often assumed that if the audience laughed, the target could take it. Burr's quiet exit proved otherwise. It revealed a Carson who could be oblivious to emotional harm, wrapped too tightly in punchlines to see the pain they might cause. In the world of late-night television, silence can be louder than outrage. And Raymond Burr's silent protest remains one of the most powerful rejections of Johnny Carson's brand of humor. While some of Carson's conflicts played out behind closed doors, others spilled directly into the public eye. One of the most surprising feuds didn't involve a celebrity or a comedian. It involved the press. And when the New York Times took aim at Carson's wallet, he fired back with a monologue that dripped with rage and sarcasm. Johnny Carson versus the New York Times. Monologue, meltdown. Johnny Carson wasn't just a talk show host. He was a cultural institution. And like any major figure in the spotlight, his private life occasionally became headline news. In 1980, the New York Times published an article stating that Carson was earning a staggering $25 million a year, making him the highest-paid television performer in history at the time. While some stars might have basked in the attention or quietly issued a correction, Carson did what he did best. He went live. That night, viewers tuned in expecting laughs, but they got something else entirely. Johnny Carson, visibly irritated, standing behind his desk with a copy of the New York Times in hand. His monologue wasn't the usual blend of topical humor and celebrity jabs. It was a direct rebuttal to the article. He called the piece damned unfair, accused the paper of printing false numbers, and expressed genuine frustration over what he claimed was an invasion of privacy and misrepresentation. The moment was startling. Carson, known for his calm composure and tight control over his on-screen image, dropped the mask. His voice was sharp, his jokes bitter, and his mood uncharacteristically raw. For the first time, the audience saw Carson not as the witty showman, but as a man defending his reputation, fighting back against what he felt was careless journalism. The impact was immediate. Media outlets picked up the story, public opinion split, and the Times stood by its reporting. Carson's decision to go public with his anger shocked both fans and colleagues, many of whom had never seen him so openly critical. The irony was thick. A man who made a career out of ribbing others didn't take kindly to being the subject of scrutiny himself. But this wasn't just about money. Carson felt betrayed, violated by a trusted national publication. He believed the article made him look greedy, especially in a time when Americans were grappling with inflation and economic instability. For someone who'd carefully built an image as a grounded, Midwestern everyman, the accusation of excess threatened to unravel the persona he had spent decades perfecting. This wasn't Carson losing his temper. It was Carson declaring war on a media institution. And while the feud didn't linger for years like some of his others, it marked a rare occasion when Carson used his own platform not to entertain, but to strike back. The gloves were off, and for once, Johnny Carson was no longer laughing. If sparring with the New York Times revealed Johnny Carson's sensitivity to public perception, his most painful and personal conflict unfolded far from the cameras, at a celebration meant to honor his legacy. It wasn't a journalist or a fellow entertainer who pushed Carson to his emotional limits this time. It was his own son. Family feud. Carson versus his son at 25th anniversary. In 1987, NBC threw a lavish celebration marking Johnny Carson's 25th anniversary as host of The Tonight Show. The event was star-studded, glamorous, and drenched in reverence for the man who had become a television legend. But behind the scenes, the evening took a dark and dramatic turn, one that no one in the public saw coming. In a shocking twist, what began as a moment of career triumph devolved into a brutal, deeply personal clash between Johnny Carson and his estranged son, Rick. Carson's relationship with his three sons had long been troubled. His dedication to The Tonight Show, his famously private nature, and his complicated history with alcohol had created distance and resentment. Rick, his middle son, had reportedly struggled to forge a connection with his father for years. So when Rick showed up to the anniversary party, emotions were already running high. According to multiple eyewitnesses, what followed wasn't just a heated exchange, it was an all-out eruption. Details remain somewhat murky. Carson was a master at keeping his private life sealed tight, but those present claimed the confrontation between Johnny and Rick happened in full view of NBC executives, show producers, and celebrity guests. What began as a quiet, tense exchange reportedly escalated to shouting, with Carson visibly furious and Rick refusing to back down. Some accounts even suggest that things nearly turned physical. Why did it happen? Some say Rick accused his father of caring more about fame than family. Others claim Johnny snapped at Rick for bringing up old grievances during what was supposed to be a celebration. Whatever the cause, the clash cut deep. Carson, already known for his emotional reserve, was said to be shaken and withdrawn for the rest of the evening. Some noticed he even left the party early. Unlike his on-air feuds, there was no punchline here. No cameras, no laugh track, just raw, unresolved tension between father and son. Carson never publicly acknowledged the incident, and his relationship with Rick remained distant for the rest of his life. Sadly, Rick died in a car crash in 1991, just 4 years later, before the two could reconcile. This heartbreaking episode offered a rare and painful glimpse into the real Johnny Carson, the man behind the desk, behind the jokes, behind the charm. For all his on-screen mastery, Carson, like many others, struggled to connect with the people who mattered most. The clash with his son wasn't just intense, it was devastating, and it remains one of the most humanizing chapters in the story of late night's most legendary figure. While Carson's feud with his son exposed emotional vulnerability, not all confrontations came from such a personal place. Sometimes, the sparks flew from live television chemistry gone wrong. And in one unforgettable case, Johnny's razor tongue finally earned him a drink in the face from a woman who'd had enough of his smug superiority. Jacqueline Suzanne's cocktail assault. Jacqueline. Suzanne was a literary force in the 60s, catapulted to fame with her wildly successful and scandalous novel, Valley of the Dolls. Though her writing was often dismissed by critics as trashy or lowbrow, her popularity with readers was undeniable. She was glamorous, outspoken, and fiercely proud of her success, which may explain why her guest appearance on The Tonight Show turned into one of the most awkward and later explosive interactions in Carson's history. It started subtly. On air, Carson introduced Suzanne with a grin that barely masked his condescension. He made a few veiled jabs at her work, calling it a guilty pleasure and teasing its content as sensationalism in print. The crowd laughed, but Suzanne didn't miss the tone. Still, she kept her cool, answering questions with grace and even poking fun at herself in return. But things took a turn when Carson, during what was meant to be a light-hearted exchange, made a biting remark about her appearance. Some sources claim he said she looked more like a truck driver than a novelist, while others report he questioned how such a frivolous woman could sell so many books. Whether it was intended as humor or insult, Suzanne was visibly stunned and not amused. She played it off in the moment. The cameras rolled, the segment ended, and the show went on. But once the taping wrapped and the lights went down, Jacqueline Suzanne delivered a response that Carson and everyone in the room would never forget. At a post-show party, with drink in hand, she reportedly walked up to Johnny, stared him down, and flung her Black Russian cocktail right in his face. The room went silent. Carson, drenched and stunned, didn't say a word. Suzanne simply turned and walked away. It was bold, theatrical, and, depending on who you ask, entirely justified. Word of the incident spread quickly, fueling gossip columns and industry chatter for weeks. Carson never publicly addressed it, but it's widely believed that Suzanne was quietly blacklisted from ever appearing on The Tonight Show again. This wasn't just a drink toss, it was a power play. In a world where male hosts often dismissed or diminished strong women with a smirk, Jacqueline Suzanne chose not to laugh it off. She hit back in the most dramatic and unforgettable way possible. The moment became legend. one of the rare times Johnny Carson's cool, collected persona was shattered by someone who refused to be the punchline. And in that flash of vodka and coffee liqueur, late night to television got a rare taste of reckoning. Jacqueline Suzanne's cocktail moment showed that Carson's jokes sometimes had real consequences, especially when they crossed into personal territory. But perhaps no controversy shook The Tonight Show's legacy more than the backlash from a joke about a rising star who would later become a cultural icon. Vanessa Williams' joke controversy, when humor crossed the line. In 1984, Vanessa Williams made history as the first African-American woman crowned Miss America. Her victory was a breakthrough moment for diversity and representation in a pageant long criticized for its narrow standards. But Johnny Carson's monologue that night delivered a joke that many considered wildly inappropriate and painfully insensitive. As Williams appeared as a guest on The Tonight Show shortly after her win, Carson made a comment referencing the pageant's history of change, a line that implied Williams's win was a gimmick or token gesture. His joke, intended to be playful, came off as dismissive and racially charged. While the audience laughed nervously, the backlash was swift and fierce. Vanessa Williams herself later expressed disappointment and hurt over the remark, saying it diminished the significance of her achievement and ignored the hard work she'd put into breaking barriers. The joke sparked wider conversations about race, representation, and the responsibilities of late-night hosts. Carson's response was a mixture of defense and apology. Privately, he acknowledged the joke had gone too far, but publicly, he remained mostly silent, letting the controversy simmer. This incident marked a rare crack in Carson's otherwise unshakable image as a unifier and genial host. Critics argued that the joke reflected broader cultural blind spots in entertainment at the time, how progress was often met with skepticism rather than celebration. Supporters contended Carson's humor was simply a reflection of the era's norms, not personal malice. Regardless, the Vanessa Williams controversy remains a key moment in late-night history. It showed that even the most beloved figures were not immune to criticism, and that a joke, no matter how harmless, could have lasting impact beyond the studio audience's laughter. For Vanessa Williams, it was a painful but pivotal experience that underscored the complexities of fame and identity. For Johnny Carson, it was a reminder that the stage he ruled was changing, and that sometimes the jokes that once landed easily could now hit a nerve. The Vanessa Williams controversy marked a moment where Carson's comedy collided with changing cultural tides. Yet, perhaps no moment better captured the complicated dance of forgiveness and rivalry than Joan Rivers' unexpected return to The Tonight Show, a reunion years in the making and charged with old wound. Joan Rivers' return and the heated reunion. After more than 2 decades of silence and public bitterness following their infamous fallout, Joan Rivers' surprise return to The Tonight Show in 2014 shocked longtime fans and the late-night world alike. The moment was hailed as historic, a reconciliation between 2 late-night giants separated by one of television's most legendary feuds. Rivers, who had endured years of professional exile following her controversial departure to Fox in the mid-'80s, was invited back by then-host Jimmy Fallon. The invitation signaled not just a mending of fences, but a recognition of Rivers' lasting impact on comedy and late-night television. But beneath the smiles and handshakes lay a complex history, full of hurt feelings, pride, and unresolved tension. When Rivers appeared on Fallon's Tonight Show to discuss her return, she candidly reflected on her relationship with Carson. She recalled how devastated she felt when Carson severed ties, how it was one of the darkest moments in her career and personal life. But she also acknowledged Carson's generosity in the early years and his undeniable influence on her success. Despite the warmth of the occasion, old emotions bubbled beneath the surface. The reunion was more than just a feel-good TV moment. It was a testament to the intense, complicated dynamics that can exist between mentors and protégés. Viewers witnessed not just forgiveness, but a mutual respect forged through shared history and pain. For Carson's legacy, the reunion complicated the narrative. The man who had once seemed unforgiving now appeared humanized by Rivers's return. It challenged fans to reconsider the nature of celebrity relationships, how ambition, loyalty, and betrayal intertwine. Joan Rivers' return to The Tonight Show was a powerful reminder that even the most intense arguments can eventually give way to understanding. But it also showed that some scars take decades to heal, and that the shadows of past conflicts can linger long after the cameras stop rolling. After decades of unforgettable moments, some hilarious, some heartbreaking, Johnny Carson's career wound down with a final chapter full of reflection and one last on-air clash that reminded everyone why he was a force to be reckoned with. The final goodbye, Carson's last on-air argument. Johnny Carson's retirement in 1992 was a landmark moment for television. For 30 years, he'd been the undisputed king of late night, the man who shaped an entire genre. But as he prepared to sign off for the last time, an unexpected on-air argument reminded viewers that beneath the polished charm was a fiercely proud man who never backed down from a challenge. During his farewell episode, Carson invited a handful of former guests, friends, and colleagues to celebrate his career. Among them was a comedian who, for years, had been both a protégé and a challenger. As the night unfolded, what started as nostalgic reminiscing quickly turned into a pointed disagreement over Carson's legacy and the future of late-night television. Carson, known for his wit and quick thinking, didn't shy away from defending his record. But when a younger comic suggested that Carson's style was outdated and that the new generation of hosts was ushering in a necessary change, the tension rose palpably. What could have been a polite exchange escalated into a sharp debate, Carson pushing back hard, asserting his lasting influence and dismissing the idea that his era was over. For many watching, it was a reminder that Carson's legacy wasn't just about jokes and interviews, it was about holding the line on quality, professionalism, and authenticity. The argument wasn't ugly, but it was charged with the passion of a man protecting his life's work. In the final moments of the show, Carson's tone softened. He acknowledged the changing landscape, but insisted that the foundation he laid would endure. The farewell ended with laughter and applause, but the argument lingered as a testament to Carson's complexity, his pride, his passion, and his refusal to fade quietly. Johnny Carson's last on-air argument wasn't just a clash of opinions, it was a fitting finale for a career defined by intensity, humor, and the relentless pursuit of excellence. As he turned off the lights on The Tonight Show, he left behind a legacy that remains unmatched, and a reminder that even legends have fiery moments that shape their story. Johnny Carson wasn't just a late-night host. He was a legend shaped as much by his unforgettable wit as by his intense, sometimes explosive conflicts. From fiery celebrity showdowns to deeply personal family battles, these moments revealed the man behind the microphone, proud, passionate, and fiercely human. Carson's legacy isn't just about laughs. It's about the complex drama that made his career truly unforgettable. These intense arguments remind us that even comedy's greatest can spark controversy, and that sometimes the best stories happen off-camera. Thanks for watching the video. Subscribe to this channel for more exciting content like this.